Or what's yours?
I'm Lauren Fox on Capitol Hill, and this is CNN.
And we are back with human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, a lead lawyer on a new case against a French company for aiding and abetting ISIS. Joining her is the lead plaintiff in the case, Nadia Murad. Nadia, when you think about all the challenges you have had, I mean, you have managed to, you were sold into the sex trade by ISIS, and now look at you, obviously you've won the Nobel Prize, but you're also a student at American University. I think about the first time I met you, you could barely speak a word of English. You're now writing papers in sociology in English. What do you think made it possible for you to have the kind of grit and determination to move out of the shadows of this tragedy into the kind of work you're doing now?
I decided to share my story at the very beginning when I survived because I saw the evil of ISIS, and it was important for the world to remind the world about the horrific crimes ISIS committed against Yazidis, and in order to prevent this from happening again, I had to share my story, and I felt responsible because I was lucky enough to survive, but my nieces who were with me were later killed by ISIS in captivity, and they didn't make it. And when you make it and when you survive, you just feel this burden and the guilt of going out there and sharing your story. And later to learn that, such corporations directly supported ISIS in their crimes, war crimes, it was just sickening and unbearable.
To me,
I think that's one of the sort of really shocking features of this whole sort of episode is that, neither the armed groups nor their financiers expect to face accountability, and you can see that by just how brazen they are. So literally ISIS wrote down its plan for genocide. It explained why, under its warped interpretation of Islam, it was okay to rape Yazidis and try to destroy Yazidis. And equally, this company initially was brazen in its support. And, we've looked at all these documents where you see there's an agreement and it's on ISIS letterhead and it has the name of the company on it. One of the documents is literally signed by the emir of the Investment Office of Islamic State. They weren't even trying to cover their tracks initially, but yeah, I mean, the terrorists are brazen and the financiers are brazen, and they will continue to do so long as they're not being punished.
What's so interesting about that is what both of you are trying to do is we forget, right? I mean, what happened with ISIS was horrendous, and the world rose up in kind of horror. But then once it was defeated militarily on the battlefield, it passes. And what you're trying to do is to remind people, what you're trying to do is hold people accountable. How hard is that when you go and talk to people in governments? Do you find it's a hard sell to remind them of the things that they had been so repulsed by just a few years ago?
I think that's what Mal and I will always talk about it. After ISIS was defeated, the pain and the trauma was not gone, but it was there. And soon after that, we saw a news cycle just moving on and going to another story and covering another story. But it is we still have more than 2,000 Yazidi women and children missing in captivity. So far we have covered more than 83 mass graves, and it's been almost 10 years. I have been able to only bury 2 of my brothers. I have my mother and 4 brothers, 2 nieces, 11 cousins, 1 nephew. They all were killed, and some of them are now in a building in Baghdad, have not been, they've been exhumed but have not been identified. And there is no closure without a proper burial for those families.
Amal, what do you think are the implications for all this? You know that there is this conversation now about sexual war crimes committed by Hamas. There are things going on in the world now. And when you look at that with all this knowledge, what are the lessons?
I think the lesson is it costs money to commit crimes like this and crimes at this scale. and we have to continue to pursue justice in, you know, every forum. So we, you know, as lawyers, you know, we're not governments. We can't, unfortunately, prevent these atrocities, but at least after they happen, we can work with survivors and build cases, you know, anything that can move the needle towards accountability and away from impunity, meaning perpetrators have to face prosecution and victims have to be able to get some assistance in rebuilding their lives. They deserve compensation at the very least, and I think that cuts across the board for you know, victims of sexual violence, whether it's Sudan or victims of international crimes taking place now in the Middle East.
Thank you both. This is such important work you're doing. Amal, Nadia, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Fareed.
Next on GPS, David Brooks will tell us how to preserve our humanity in dark times after the break.